Yeah, now along those lines, you looked at there's 6 games out in the wild card, so it's something like, what is the biggest thing they need? And the one thing that guy that's been brought up was Jake Cronenworth. Like he's a guy that's been talked about maybe leaving, maybe not. But do you think I just the team to me? I look on paper and I see I'm like, man, why aren't these guys not winning? They have such a solid team. If I'm then I'm trying to get another piece, and I'm trying not to move my big guns, but I mean, how much do they have in the young gun era now too? Like, do they have the prospects? That's the biggest thing. I don't know what they should really do. It's a tough question.
I, they've been able to make a lot of moves over the last couple of seasons because they did have that really strong farm system. And I think you look at a guy like Ethan Salas, who I don't know if they really want to move. A guy who was 17 a couple of weeks ago, hitting almost 900 in advanced A. Like that's a guy that I think a lot of teams would like to get their hands on, but I don't think the Padres would be inclined to move him. And you're right. I think with Jake Cronenworth, that was a guy that they extended, right, in this past offseason. And you expected him to continue to ascend. Hasn't really had that production that you thought you'd see from him after what we've seen the last couple of years. But if I'm the Padres, maybe adding a little bit more pitching, right? You look at what Blake Snell's been able to do over his last 2 games, has an ERA of 0.62. That is he's really showing out. He's showing us that he's back to being Cy Young Blake Snell. But I don't think playoff teams, I don't think teams that really want to compete for that World Series can ever have enough starting pitching. And I think there's going to be enough starters available, even if it's not the high-end guys like Marcus Stroman, maybe a Jordan Montgomery, right? Like maybe that's somebody that can fit for what they want to do. Maybe adding a little bit of bullpen help in the back end, like a guy like a Kendall Graveman who we just talked about. I think those would likely be the pieces that they add, not the major.
Okay, let's move to the Mets. And I think it's pretty clear cut. They're 7.5 out of a wild card. They're 7 games under 500. Who's more likely to get dealt? After we also talked earlier about a JP Morosi tweet saying that the Angels are still listening on offers, which is smart. I mean, they should listen. And then if they suddenly collapse over the next week and their owner changes his mind, they're already lined up. Who's more likely to get dealt, Scherzer or Ohtani?
I like the question because it makes me really think about it from a lot of different angles. I'll say Shohei from the standpoint of it's the guy who's going to be the free agent at the end of the season. If I'm a team that is looking to win in 2023, I'm not thinking about 2 years from now. I'm not thinking about prospects that we have coming up 2 years from now. I'm trying to win this season. And I look at a guy in Shohei Ohtani and say, okay, that's the guy who's going to hit second or third for me. That's the guy that I'm going to put at the top of my rotation for the next 2 months and hopefully in October as well. Like, I'm going to do everything I can to get that guy. Like, but who is that team, right? Who is fearless enough to say what happens this offseason doesn't matter? I know Shohei's going to get $600 million, but I'm going to give up the prospect capital it takes to bring him in and hopefully go all in on this season. So I'm going to say Shohei.
Okay. I like it. Yeah, it's a good question. And then lastly, let's get a fan question in there based on our White Sox talk from earlier. AJ Early, big White Sox guy in our chat, usually says, why is Rick Hahn getting a chance to do a third rebuild in 11 seasons when they only have 2 winning seasons in those 11 seasons? And one of them was the COVID year, which was doesn't really count.
So doesn't count.
You've won once in 10 years with 2 rebuilds, and now this is going to be number 3 if they start to tear it down.
It's a really fair question from a fan base that has been waiting for a long time for them to get things right. And the more you think about the White Sox in the last 20 years, you look at that 2005 team, that 2006 team a little bit differently, where instead of saying, all right, they built it the right way, did they catch lightning in a bottle? And it really worked out for them. You look at since Todd was there, right? You look at that, that's the Samardzija Marcus Semien trade, and then they move on from those guys, and you bring in Yohan Moncada, you trade Chris Sale, and then that doesn't work. Now you have this core of players where the mix just isn't right, and you have some success in there, and you get some things to go your way, and then it's always felt like the White Sox thought that it was their time and that they deserved to be the best team in the AL Central. And because they did everything the right way as far as their rebuild, and they had the best farm system in baseball, and they had the prospects, and they had the young guns, and they made the right trades that, all right, everything's going to come together. Here's our window. And it never happened. And to answer the question of why does Rick Hahn get the opportunity to do this a third time, if that's the direction they're going to go in, which it looks like they will, until I see with my own eyes that Jerry Reinsdorf is going to fire a general manager, there's no evidence for us to believe that that's going to be the case. And so if that's not, if we're going to just go off of what we've seen, I imagine that Rick does get another opportunity to try to get this thing right for the White Sox.
Jerry doesn't fire anybody, but I need you more definitively, okay? Here, I need a definitive answer.
And quick, we're tight on time.
Okay. Do the Cubs trade more guys or the White Sox trade more guys at the break?
White Sox.
Wow. That was easy.
Cubs have more of the value, but maybe not as many of
not as
players.
many guys.
Yeah, I mean it's Stroman and Bellinger leading the pack there, maybe a reliever, so it's close. Kratz is really quizzing everyone today. He's making everyone think.
I love it.
I love it too. I love the pop quiz stuff too. Russ, good to see you. We'll talk later.